In the United States, President Biden says he won't be sending in the National Guard to deal with a wave of student-led protests against Israel's war against Hamas. Biden says demonstrators have the right to protest peacefully, but not to cause chaos. Crews have been cleaning up at the University of California's Los Angeles site hours after police removed barricades and began dismantling a pro-Palestinian protest camp in the early hours of Thursday. Officers arrested dozens of demonstrators in the pre-dawn raid after protesters defied orders to leave. More than 2,000 people have been arrested on university and college campuses across the U.S. in the last 2 weeks alone.
Before the sun had even risen, police moved in to tear down the barricades. Stun grenades rang out and smoke filled the air as officers forced the protesters back after several hundred defied orders to leave the area. Once through the defences, the police set to work destroying the tents students had been camped out in for days and making arrests. Other demonstrators watched and recorded as the encampment was torn apart and taunted officers for their slow response to an attack by pro-Israel counter-protesters the night before.
For them to come out the next night to remove us from the encampment after they felt absolutely no obligation or duty to protect the first night, it doesn't make any sense, but it also makes all the sense in the world. I'm not surprised.
The camp at the University of California's Los Angeles campus is just one of dozens that have sprung up across the US. Students have been demanding their universities sever financial ties with companies linked to Israel and its war efforts. But critics have accused the pro-Palestinian activists of intimidation and anti-Semitism. President Biden has now weighed in, defending the right to peaceful protest, but accusing the demonstrators of causing chaos.
We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. The American people are heard. In fact, peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to consequential issues. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos. People have the right to get an education, the right to get a degree, the right to walk across the campus safely without fear of being attacked.
Authorities say order has now been restored at UCLA, with over 100 protesters arrested. Police remain stationed at the scene to stop anyone trying to come back to rebuild the encampment.
Katharina Wilhelm is a correspondent for Germany's public broadcaster. She has the latest now from the UCLA campus in Los Angeles.
Well, what we clearly see is there is not a camp anymore. Actually, the actions took place yesterday evening. The police called the protesters to disperse, which they didn't do, and that basically led to a lot of arrests, 210 arrests in total. That's what LAPD said today. And now actually throughout the day there was just a big cleanup movement, and so actually all the tents are gone, everything is gone, so basically nothing really leads to the assumption there was even a protest camp. And police seems to be remaining here on the UCLA campus. Also courses, the students can't really go back to studying. Even tomorrow there is the open question if campus life is going back to normal or it has maybe to wait until next week.
Now, you were on hand for that police action, and there have been some suggestions that the demonstrators were actually infiltrated by outside groups. What exactly did you see?
Well, actually, we saw a lot of different groups. There were, of course, students who were protesting in these camps. The pro-Palestinian students were protesting. Then there is this group that came in on Tuesday night to Wednesday, and there is this open question of who these agitators were, who basically attacked the camp. That's what all the students told us here. It is unclear right now if this was like a student-led pro-Israeli demonstration, if these were outsiders. There is actually an investigation going on from LAPD, but also from the campus, because there's also been accusations to the campus, to the faculty, that they have responded way too late to basically disperse the protests and to try to not let to get the violence go ahead as it was. We had at least 15 people who were wounded, one person probably in going to a hospital. These actually, it varies from who you ask, the protesters or the police. But basically there's a lot of open questions still and investigations that be going on.
And of course, those open questions are having some political effects as well. This is ramping up the pressure on President Biden. So tell us, just how much pressure is the U.S. president currently facing because of these protests?
Well, the pressure is, of course, because of the elections. He wants the young voters, he wants the voice of the young voters, but they are very, very upset with the politics of Joe Biden. They're calling out his Israel politics, but as he said clearly in a press conference just today, is that these protests will have no effect on the Israel politics so far. But still, the pressure remains on President Biden throughout all the campuses here in the United States who are facing protests. There are still some encampments, maybe not here in UCLA, but still a lot of different universities throughout California and the East Coast especially. And we will see. I think the pressure will remain on President Biden.
All right, that was journalist Katarina Wilhelm in Los Angeles. Thank you very much for your reporting. And in the Mideast, Hamas has said it will send another delegation to Cairo for more ceasefire talks. That's as the Palestinian militant group continues to study an Egyptian proposal to end the fighting in Gaza. Israel's war cabinet has also been meeting to discuss the truce deal, as well as plans for a ground offensive on the southern Gazan city of Rafah. As those negotiations continue, the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip remains dire, even as more aid has entered the besieged territory in recent days. Aid is continuing to trickle into the Strip via airdrops, while on Wednesday, Israel reopened the only border crossing into northern Gaza for aid. Humanitarian groups had been urging Israeli authorities to let supplies enter via the Erez crossing for months now. The UN has warned repeatedly that Gazans are desperately short of food and other essential supplies, with northern Gaza in particular on the brink of famine. British surgeon Khalid Dawas has just returned from a trip to Gaza, where he was working with emergency medical teams from the International Rescue Committee and medical aid for Palestinians. We asked him earlier why he left his practice in London to head into a war zone.
The pictures that we all saw, I think the suffering that we see on TV and that we'd heard stories about were a great pull. I've been going to Gaza for a number of years as a chair of an educational charity that works with the medical schools in Palestine overall. And when this happened, clearly there was a big draw. I took my annual leave from work and decided to go for a couple of weeks in December, January, and then I went again back in April. I think when you go there, you realize what the need is. It's huge, and anything that I can do, and many of my colleagues feel the same way, we would be more than happy to provide.
Here's a brief look now at some other stories making headlines around the world. Turkey is suspending all trade with Israel. Ankara says the measures will be in place until Israel allows an uninterrupted and sufficient flow of aid into Gaza. Israel's foreign minister responded by accusing Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of breaking trade agreements. Israeli Katz posted on social media saying, quote, "This is how a dictator behaves."